My name, as Giovanna just said, is Professor Michael Walls. I'm the director of the Bartlett Development Planning Unit. The DPU, I just want to give you a few words about where we came from, because I think that's important in sort of explaining exactly what it is we're trying to do. The DPU was formed in 1954, so we've been around for quite a long time. At that stage, we were the Architecture Association's tropical school. That was the name that was given to us initially. One of the first directors of DPU, Otto Königsberger, used to say that our job was to do ourselves out of a job by helping build capacity in the global south in order to plan effectively without help from London or someone else in richer, more politically powerful northern countries, at that stage often also colonial countries. Of course, the circumstances since 1954, just after a major world war, in the midst of processes of decolonization, were significantly different from where we find ourselves today. And perhaps still being here some 66 years later shows just how complicated this process we talk about as development planning really is. In fact, the very notion of development itself has changed really substantially over those years. Back in 1954, the founders of DPU were concerned with challenging the technocratic and rather patronizing view that development was a process that happened in stages and took countries from a more primitive state of being undeveloped to a more advanced state of development. That was the original kind of idea that revolved around this idea of development planning. At that stage, even then, Königsberger was concerned with his colleagues, the founders of DPU, to challenge that idea, to challenge the idea that urbanization, industrialization, social and economic transformation were a linear path that looked much the same from one place to another and could be accomplished with some kind of technocratic process of planning. We're proud of that tradition. It's a tradition of critical thinking and of challenging the orthodox assumptions that lie behind some understandings of what development is all about. Those founding principles still sit at the heart of our activities, and that's why I think it's important to mention some of that history. DPU is now a much bigger and more complex entity than it was back then, of course. Today, we offer 7 postgraduate taught degrees and a PhD program covering a range of topics unimaginable 66 years ago. From urban development planning and design to environmentally sustainable development, national development planning to health, social development, urban economics. Now, happily, all those years of experience means that the growth has meant that we attract a large number of applications, that getting into DPU now is a competitive business. All of you, for example, and I expect that you've all got questions about exactly how all that works and what it is you're applying to. We're also very much engaged in research across the spectrum of what we mean by development planning, as well as in consultancy encompassing a similar breadth of focus. But our ethos still reflects, as I just said, that early commitment in some really important ways. As a world, we face serious inequalities, social injustice, and the really critical challenge of climate change. And many of those things have been thrown into even sharper relief by the pandemic that we're still living through. It's no more acceptable now than it was in 1954 to imagine that those challenges can be dealt with just by experts, whether in universities or development agencies. That's not to say that universities and development agencies don't have a role which they can play better or worse. It certainly doesn't mean that development is something that can happen at the behest of or the direction of old colonial powers or the wealthiest economies. If we're really to achieve positive change, it needs to affect and involve all of us. It needs to involve collaborative thinking in which we all have so much to learn from each other. We really believe that it's vital that we work with our partners, and by our partners, I mean the full breadth of partners from actually students through to researchers, through to people in other countries and other cities, as well as our colleagues in DPU and at UCL. Our teaching therefore emphasizes collaboration, just as our research and consultancy do. For the pedagogical experience, that means we place great emphasis on working with partners, a diversity of partners, many of whom we have long established relationships with. We're keen to allow you, our students, or our students-to-be, to play a full role in those engagements. We also emphasize the importance of developing your own critical capacities, your ability to view developmental processes from multiple perspectives. Our partnerships are in many ways what makes our work meaningful, and it's through those practical connections that we believe that we can connect the competing theories of development planning with their practical impacts on the lives of real people. Development planning is both theoretical and practical. Far from being abstracted from reality, it's embedded within it. And understanding both the complexities and the very real consequences of those relationships rests centrally on connecting ideas with the lived realities of those we work with. Above all, development planning is a process embedded in reality, and we remain fully committed to the objective of understanding how it can be a force for greater social and environmental justice and better lives for people generally. Before we move on to addressing a few more of the details and taking your questions, I want to mention briefly and in slightly more detail than I just have, the range of degree programs that we offer. So I'm just going to run through them now. And of course, you're all thinking of one of these, but it's good to know which one you're applying to and where it sits in the range of other programs that are on offer. So first of all, and this is in alphabetical order, not in any other system of organization. So firstly, there's BUD, which is Building an Urban Design for Development. That program, as I just said, often known simply as BUD, addresses the theory and practice of urban design and its role in building just cities and communities. The next is Development Administration and Planning, or DAP, which considers the policy level and the roles of different actors in working towards more sustainable development outcomes. The next is Environment and Sustainable Development, or ESD, which focuses on the options available for enhancing socio-environmental justice in the urban global south. Health and Urban Development, or HUD, goes right to the heart of some of the most immediate challenges, the pandemic included, around the interrelationships between formal and informal urban contexts, health disparities, social justice, and development planning in the global south. Social Development Practice, or SDP, zeroes in on people-centered approaches to international development and the policy platforms required to support them, while Urban Development Practice, or UDP, the oldest of our master's programs, right back from the beginning of that process that I was describing before, explores the analytical and practical tools available for engaging reflexively with Global South urban development and planning. The Urban Economic Development Program, or UED, explores ways to enhance urban productivity while also promoting sustainability and equity through public intervention in cities. And finally, there's the Infield PhD program, which Ariana is going to talk about in a minute. That marks a significant step up again from taught postgraduate study. PhD candidates are required to undertake a rigorous and self-directed program of research and analysis over a number of years. Of course, with the support of a supervisor and all the resources available at DPU and beyond in UCL, and even beyond that. But the critical direction for the MPhil PhD program is set by the student themselves. Now, I hope that gives a flavor of the breadth of topics that we cover at DPU. As I said at the beginning of the list of programs, you all will have one of those in mind because that's probably the one that you're interested in applying to or maybe have applied to. We'd love to have you join us on one or other of those particular journeys, those programs. I look forward also to eventually, hopefully, meeting many of you personally. That's all I want to say. Thank you for listening.